There's a moment when you realize the person you sacrificed everything for doesn't actually see you at all. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday evening when my son Malik looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was now a liability. I'd just come from my meeting with Isaiah Porter, my boss. Well, my supposed boss of 15 years at Preston & Associates. Rain dripped from my coat onto the polished hardwood floors of the home I'd quietly helped purchase. Malik glanced up from his laptop at the kitchen island, his wife Tanisha chopping vegetables with that mechanical precision she'd perfected over 10 years of marriage. "You're home early," he said, not bothering to hide the suspicion creeping into his voice. I hung my coat carefully on the rack, buying myself a few extra seconds before I had to say the words aloud. The words I'd rehearsed with Isaiah for 2 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to deploy them. Isaiah called me into his office today. I paused, forcing my voice to tremble just slightly. "The firm is downsizing. After the merger, they're letting me go." The knife in Tanisha's hand stopped mid-chop. Malik's expression shifted from surprise to something darker, something that made my stomach twist, even though I'd been expecting it. "Let go," he repeated, closing his laptop with a sharp snap. What does that mean exactly? I moved toward the kitchen counter, letting my legs look unsteady. 30 years as a CPA had taught me that sometimes the most important numbers are the ones you don't put on the balance sheet. And for 15 years, I'd been keeping the biggest number of all off my family's ledger. It means I no longer have a job at Preston & Associates. I forced myself to meet his eyes. They're giving me a severance package, of course. But after 15 years... I let my voice trail off, playing the part of the devastated middle-aged woman facing an uncertain future. "How much?" Tanisha interrupted, placing the knife down with deliberate care. Her lawyer's mind was already calculating, already planning. 3 months' salary, I replied, noting how her shoulders tensed. "It's standard, really, and I've already started looking at other opportunities. At 55, I'm hardly ready for retirement." Malik stood up and began pacing, running his fingers through his dark hair the same way his father used to when agitated. My heart squeezed. Even now, even after everything, he could still remind me of Jerome so completely it hurt. 3 months. That's it. His voice rose. After 15 years, they're just tossing you aside with 3 months' pay. For a moment, exactly 2 seconds I counted, I thought he was angry on my behalf, concerned about how I'd been treated by a firm that had undervalued my contributions. That warm thought lasted exactly as long as it took him to say his next words. "What about the mortgage payment?" He continued, his voice tight. "The property taxes, Tanisha's student loans from her LLM program. We had a plan, Mom. You were supposed to keep working until I finished paying off my medical school debt." The air seemed to leave the room all at once. I stared at my son, this grown man I'd raised alone after his father dropped dead of a heart attack at 43. The boy I'd worked 3 jobs for so he could attend that expensive private high school. The teenager I'd poured my retirement savings into, or so he thought, to ensure he could go to Johns Hopkins without crushing debt. "I didn't plan to lose my job, Malik," I said quietly. Tanisha pushed her sleek black hair behind her ear, and I caught something in her expression, something I couldn't quite read. "No one plans these things, Tiana," she said, her tone smooth and patient, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "But responsible people prepare for them. Do you have any savings at all? Any investments? Anything we can use to weather the storm?" The irony of her question nearly made me laugh. If she only knew. If she only knew about the offshore account Isaiah had helped me set up 12 years ago. If she only knew about the investment portfolio that had grown steadily, carefully, magnificently. If she only knew about the 3 properties I owned downtown, quietly appreciating in value year after year. But I kept my face carefully neutral, just as I'd practiced in the mirror that morning. "I have some savings," I said, "enough to keep myself afloat while I look for another position." Malik stopped pacing. "Yourself, what about us? This arrangement has always been that you help with the household expenses. That was the deal when you moved in." "When you asked me to move in," I corrected him gently. "After your father died, you insisted I sell my house and come live with you and Tanisha because, in your words, family should stick together." Tanisha's laugh was like ice cracking. "That was before you became a financial liability, Tiana. We're trying to start a family. We can't afford to support a third adult who isn't contributing." I looked around the spacious kitchen with its marble countertops and high-end appliances. The house where I'd contributed not gifted because I'd wanted Malik to feel like the provider 60% of the down payment 5 years ago as a wedding present. The house where my monthly rent covered most of the mortgage payment. I understand your concern, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the performance. I'll find another job as quickly as possible. And in the meantime, Malik pressed his voice, taking on that edge it got when he wasn't getting his way. What exactly is your plan until then? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew who it was without looking. Isaiah, right on schedule. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen, making sure they could see my face change as I read the message. It was all part of the choreography we'd planned. The buyout cleared. 8.5 M in account number 4721. Board approved your exit. Your free partner. Time to stop hiding. My heart raced as I read the words, but I tucked the phone away without replying. Something about Malik's tone, about Tanisha's calculating gaze, about the way they were already planning my exit from their lives, made me want to savor this moment just a little longer. For 15 years, I'd been the reliable foundation of this household, the steady stream of income they could always count on, the safety net that never failed. Maybe it was time they learned what life would be like without that security. I have some options, I said vaguely. I'll figure it out. Malik exchanged a look with Tanisha, a silent communication that excluded me entirely. Then he turned back his expression, now carefully composed, into one of sympathetic concern that I recognized from every time he'd tried to manage me over the years. Mom, you've always been terrible with money. Dad handled everything when he was alive, and then I helped you manage things after he passed. I don't think you realize how serious the situation is. I felt a flash of indignation that was entirely genuine. Terrible with money, I'd been a CPA for over 30 years. I'd managed multi-million-dollar portfolios for Preston & Associates' wealthiest clients. I'd kept meticulous records, turned failing investments into gold mines, and built wealth so quietly, so carefully, that not even the people I lived with suspected the truth. But at home, I'd played a role, the slightly helpless mother who needed guidance with her checkbook, who couldn't quite understand investment strategies, who relied on her smart doctor son to handle the complicated stuff. It had made Malik feel needed, important. After Jerome died, my boy had been so lost, so desperate to be the man of the house. And I'd given him that gift, the gift of feeling necessary, of being the protector. It had been an act of love. Now, standing in this kitchen while he used that gift as a weapon against me, I wondered if it had been the right choice after all. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'll be fine. Tanisha leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails, I'd paid for that manicure, same as I'd paid for most things around here, spread on the counter. Tiana, we've been thinking. My mother mentioned that Golden Sunset Assisted Living has openings for resident aides. The pay isn't great, but they provide room and board. It could be perfect for you while you get back on your feet. I stared at her, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. You want me to work as an aide in a nursing home? It's a retirement community, she corrected smoothly, as if the semantics made any difference. And yes, I think it makes perfect sense. You've always been good with older people, and it would solve the housing issue. What housing issue? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd known it was coming since the moment Malik's expression had shifted from surprise to calculation when I'd announced my layoff. Malik cleared his throat. We can't afford to support you, Mom. Not with our plans to start a family. Not with our debt. If you're not contributing financially— He paused, and I could see him struggling with how to phrase it. You can't stay here. The words hung in the air between us. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up late poring over financial aid forms, loan applications, scholarship essays. All the overtime I'd worked or pretended to work since I was actually building a business empire. All the vacations I'd skipped, the retirement contributions I'd claimed to reduce but had actually been funneling into my private accounts. All of it to ensure Malik could follow his dreams without the crushing weight of debt. And now, at the first sign that I might need support in return, they were looking for the most convenient way to remove me from their lives. Good, a voice in my head whispered. Let them show you who they really are. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm brewing inside me. And how long do I have before I need to make other arrangements? Tanisha glanced at Malik, and something passed between them that I couldn't quite read. Was that guilt or just coordination of their attack? Well, ideally, we've already called Golden Sunset, Malik interrupted, apparently deciding that ripping off the bandage quickly was the better approach. They have an opening starting next week. The director is a friend of Tanisha's parents. She said she'd expedite your application. Next week. They wanted me gone in a week. I nodded slowly, using the gesture to buy time while I processed this information. Not that I needed to process it, I'd expected something like this, but the speed, the efficiency with which they'd planned my removal, that was illuminating. That's very efficient of you, I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. We're just trying to be practical, Vanessa said, resuming her vegetable chopping as if we'd just finished discussing dinner plans instead of dismantling my entire living arrangement. You always taught Malik the importance of planning ahead. Indeed, I had. Planning ahead was exactly what had led me to save and invest so carefully over the years. Planning ahead was why I'd never told Malik about the trust fund his grandfather had left him, $2.3 million quietly growing, waiting for the day he was mature enough to handle it. Planning ahead was why Isaiah and I had spent 15 years building a private equity firm in secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal our partnership. Planning ahead was why I had a net worth of $18.5 million that neither of them knew anything about. You're right, I said, forcing a smile. Planning ahead is essential. I appreciate you both looking out for me. Malik's shoulders relaxed, visibly relief washing over his face. He actually thought he'd won, that he'd successfully managed his helpless mother into accepting her fate. We care about you, Mom, he said, his voice softer now. We just need to be realistic about our situation. Of course, I agreed, turning to leave the kitchen. I should probably start packing. Mom, Malik called after me, his voice taking on that gentle, patronizing tone that I'd come to recognize over the years. I know this seems harsh, but it's for the best. You'll see. I paused at the doorway, looking back at my son and his wife in their expensive kitchen, already mentally checking off the task of dealing with Mom from their to-do list. Yes, I said quietly, allowing myself the smallest smile. I believe I will. As I climbed the stairs to my room, the smallest bedroom in the house, the one I'd taken so Malik could have a home office, and Tanisha could have her yoga studio, my phone buzzed again. Tay, please tell me you're going through with it. It's time. They need to see who you really are. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop, logging into the banking portal that Malik didn't know existed. The numbers on the screen confirmed what I already knew: Preston & Associates buyout, $500,000 investment portfolio, $200,000 real estate holdings, $100,000 liquid assets, $700,000 total net worth, $500,000, even more than I'd told Isaiah. The side investments had performed better than expected. For decades, I'd been the safety net for others. I'd caught Malik every time he fell, cushioned every blow, smoothed every path. And in doing so, I'd raised a son who believed that support should only flow in one direction toward him. It was time to change that narrative. I opened a new browser tab and began searching for apartments in the upscale Riverside district, the same neighborhood where Tanisha's parents, Laverne and Raymond Brooks, lived in their sprawling colonial that they never let me forget, cost just over $2 million. A smile curved my lips as I scrolled through the listings. Perhaps it was time to introduce my family to the woman I truly was, not the convenient fiction they'd created. The woman with the financial acumen to turn a modest inheritance from my Aunt Lillian into a small fortune. The woman who'd been offered a partnership in what would become one of the city's most successful private equity firms. The woman who'd secretly owned 40% of Preston & Associates since year 3. The woman who, for the first time in decades, was going to put herself first. I clicked on a stunning 3-bedroom penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a panoramic view of the city. Monthly rent $12,000, easily 3 times what I was currently contributing to Malik's mortgage. Perfect, I murmured, filling out the inquiry form. Time to reintroduce myself. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Tanisha. Mom called. She's bringing the Golden Sunset paperwork tomorrow. Please be open-minded about this. It's really a great opportunity. I stared at the message, then typed back. I'm always open-minded. See you tomorrow. As I hit send, I caught sight of my reflection in the dresser mirror. Still wearing my sensible cardigan and slacks. Still with my hair in the practical style I'd maintained for years. Still looking every bit the part of the dependent mother who needed her son's guidance. Tomorrow that would start to change. The real Tiana Williams was about to make her debut, and my family had no idea what was coming. The next morning arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that felt almost mocking given the circumstances. I was in the kitchen making coffee, my last pot in this house, though Malik and Tanisha didn't know that yet when the doorbell rang at exactly 9:00 a.m. Laverne Brooks was nothing if not punctual. I opened the door to find her standing there in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent payment. She held a leather folder embossed with the Golden Sunset logo, and her expression was set in that particular arrangement of sympathy and superiority that she'd perfected over the years. "Tiana," she said, air-kissing my cheeks in the foyer, "I heard about your unfortunate employment situation. Such bad timing with Vanessa and Malik trying to start a family." I ushered her into the living room, noting how her eyes swept critically over my simple cardigan and slacks. Laverne had never approved of her daughter marrying a doctor whose mother was just an accountant. The fact that I'd put Malik through medical school with my just an accountant salary seemed irrelevant to her calculus of social worth. "Thank you for bringing the paperwork, Laverne," I said, accepting the folder she thrust toward me. "Though I'm not entirely sure the position is right for me." Laverne's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Not right for you." She settled onto the sofa without being invited. "Tiana, be reasonable. What other options do you have at your age?" I could have told her about the penthouse viewing I had scheduled for that afternoon. I could have mentioned the standing offer from Isaiah to finally go public with our partnership. I could have pulled up my banking app and shown her numbers that would make her cream-colored suit look like a thrift store purchase. Instead, I simply smiled. "I'm exploring several possibilities." Laverne laughed that sharp, dismissive sound that made me wonder how Tanisha had turned out as well as she had. "At your age in this economy," she leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "Tiana, you're 55 years old with no specialized skills beyond basic bookkeeping. Golden Sunset is offering you shelter and income. You should be grateful." I opened the folder and scanned the contents. The position paid $15.50 an hour with a small studio apartment as part of the compensation package. The duties included everything from serving meals to cleaning rooms to assisting residents with personal care. It was honest work, respectable work, but it was also a stark illustration of what my family thought I was worth. "I'll certainly give it serious consideration," I said, closing the folder. Laverne leaned back, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then her face softened slightly, and for just a moment I saw something real beneath the polished exterior. "Between us, Tiana," she said, her voice quieter now, "I know what it's like to have nothing. I grew up in the projects on the South Side, shared a bedroom with 4 sisters. My mother cleaned houses, and my father—" She paused. "Well, he wasn't around much." I blinked, surprised by this sudden glimpse of vulnerability. "I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college," she continued. "Ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to remember. Wore the same 2 outfits to class for an entire semester." She met my eyes. "I clawed my way up from nothing, and I swore my children would never know that kind of struggle." "That's admirable," I said, and I meant it. "Which is why I can't." She stopped herself, shook her head. "Tanisha is my only daughter. I won't watch her sacrifice her future to support someone who should have planned better." And there it was. The real Laverne Brooks, shaped by poverty into someone so terrified of falling back down that she'd push anyone else off the ladder to keep her own position secure. I understood her better now, but understanding didn't make her actions hurt any less. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but you're making assumptions about my situation that aren't entirely accurate." Laverne stood smoothing her expensive silk blouse. "The director expects your call by tomorrow, Tiana. Don't disappoint her. Opportunities like this don't come along every day for women in your situation." After she left, I sat in the silent living room, the Golden Sunset folder on my lap. My phone buzzed with a text from the Riverside Grand's leasing office. "Ms. Williams, your 2 p.m. viewing is confirmed. Given your financial profile, we can offer immediate occupancy if you decide to proceed. Mara Chen, Senior Leasing Agent." I smiled, texting back a confirmation, then headed upstairs to change into something more appropriate for viewing penthouses. That's when I heard them. Malik and Tanisha's voices drifting from their bedroom, the door not quite closed. I should have kept walking, respected their privacy. But something in Malik's tone, desperate, almost panicked, made me pause at the top of the stairs. "We can't keep this from her forever," Tanisha was saying. "She deserves to know." "Know what?" Malik's voice cracked. "That I'm 3 months away from bankruptcy, that I gambled away our savings, that there are men calling my office threatening to—" He cut himself off. My blood ran cold. "Malik, listen to me. Tanisha's voice was firm but gentle. Your mother has resources. I've seen that. She has nothing, Malik shouted, and I heard something slam his fist against the dresser maybe. Stop with this conspiracy theory. My mother is a $60,000 a year accountant who's about to be homeless. She can't save herself, let alone save me. There was a long silence. Then Tanisha spoke, her voice so quiet I had to strain to hear. The background check I ran before we got married. The one my firm requires for all partners' family members. Malik, your mother owns... I don't want to hear it. Another slam. Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. My father always said Mom was terrible with money. That's why he handled everything. That's why I've been handling everything since he died. She needs me, Tanisha. She's always needed me. Or maybe, Tanisha said slowly, she let you think she needed you. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Malik was in trouble. Real trouble. $850,000 in gambling debts, if I'd heard correctly. And Tanisha? Tanisha had run a background check. She knew. Or suspected at least. How long had she known I made it to my room and closed the door leaning against it as I processed what I'd just heard? My baby boy, my Malik, the son I'd raised to be responsible and honest, was drowning in debt from gambling. And instead of asking for help, he was trying to kick his mother out of the house. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Mrs. Williams. This is Deshaun Mitchell from Brook & Associates. Isaiah Porter referred me. I understand you may need legal counsel regarding some family matters. Available to meet today if needed. Isaiah was always 3 steps ahead. Of course, he'd already have a lawyer on standby. I texted back, yes. Can you meet at 4 p.m. after my apartment viewing? The response came immediately. Absolutely. I'll send you an address. The Riverside Grand was even more impressive in person than in the online photos. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting, and the kitchen featured appliances that probably cost more than most people's cars. Mara Chen, the leasing agent, couldn't quite hide her surprise when I immediately offered to pay 6 months' rent in advance. That's very generous, Ms. Williams, she said, glancing down at her tablet where my financial screening had presumably come back with flags she'd never seen before. But we typically only require first and last month's rent. I prefer to simplify things, I replied with a smile. And please call me Tiana. She nodded, her entire demeanor shifting subtly. I'd seen it before, that moment when people realize you have real money. The extra attention, the deference, the sudden interest in being helpful. The penthouse would be available in 3 days, Mara said. I know that's quite soon, but perfect, I interrupted. That's exactly what I need. As I signed the lease agreement, my real signature, not the diminished version of myself I'd been performing for years, my phone buzzed with a call from Malik. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a text. Mom, where are you? We need to talk about the Golden Sunset position. Laverne said you were non-committal. I texted back, out running errands. We'll be home later. Another text, this time from Tanisha, Tiana. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Golden Sunset really is a good opportunity. I pocketed my phone without responding and turned back to Mara. Is there any way to have furniture delivered and set up before I move in? I'd like to handle everything at once. Of course. Mara pulled up a contact list on her tablet. We have a preferred interior designer who specializes in executive furnishings. I can have her call you this afternoon. Excellent. I handed her a cashier's check I'd prepared that morning. 6 months' rent for a $12,000 per month penthouse. $72,000. More than my supposed annual salary. Mara's eyes widened slightly as she processed the check. I'll have the keys ready for you on Friday, Ms. Williams. Welcome to the Riverside Grand. Deshaun Mitchell's office was in the financial district, occupying the corner suite of a glass tower. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with close-cropped hair and the kind of sharp suit that spoke of success. Mrs. Williams, he greeted me standing as his assistant showed me in. Isaiah has told me a lot about you. Please sit. I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. Isaiah said you could help with some family complications. I specialize in asset protection and estate planning, Deshaun said, pulling out a legal pad. Particularly for individuals who need to maintain privacy regarding their finances. Isaiah mentioned you've been keeping a low profile for some time. 15 years, I confirmed. And now my son is trying to send me to work at a retirement home for minimum wage while I paused. While he deals with some financial issues I'm not supposed to know about. Deshawn nodded, making notes. Issues that might complicate your decision to reveal your actual financial status. He owes $850,000 to what I'm guessing are not legitimate creditors, I said. Gambling debts. Deshawn's pen stopped moving. How certain are you of that figure? I overheard him and his wife this morning. He thinks I'm broke. He's desperate, and apparently dangerous people are calling his office. And you want to... I took a deep breath. I want to teach my son that actions have consequences. I want him to see me as I really am, not as the helpless woman he's convinced himself I am, but I don't want him to end up in a hospital. Or worse. Deshawn leaned back in his chair, studying me. Those are potentially conflicting goals. I know. Do you want me to investigate the debts? Find out exactly who he owes and what kind of timeline we're looking at? I considered this. Yes, but quietly. I don't want him to know I'm looking into it. Of course. He made more notes. And your daughter-in-law Isaiah mentioned she might be aware of your situation. She ran a background check before marrying Malik. Her law firm's policy, apparently. She knows something, though I'm not sure how much. Tanisha Brooks Williams, Deshawn said, pulling up something on his computer. Corporate law at Henderson & Associates. Smart woman. If she ran a proper background check, she knows about Preston & Associates. Probably knows about at least some of your holdings. And she never said anything, I murmured. Which suggests she's either very patient, very strategic, or actually respects your privacy. Deshawn looked up from his screen. My money's on all three. I felt a flicker of something hope, maybe that my daughter-in-law might not be the enemy I'd assumed she was. There's one more thing, Deshawn said, his tone shifting. If your son owes money to loan sharks and they're threatening him at work, we're talking about a serious situation. These aren't people who accept payment plans. How serious? Serious enough that 3 months might be optimistic. Could be 3 weeks before they escalate. Could be 3 days. He met my eyes. You need to decide how you want to play this, Mrs. Williams, and you need to decide fast. I stood gathering my purse. I have a housewarming party planned for a week from Saturday. Small gathering, just some business associates and family. I think that might be the right time to clear the air. A week from Saturday, Deshawn repeated. That gives me time to get the full picture on your son's debts and possibly negotiate a temporary extension. No promises, but I have contacts in that world. Thank you, Deshawn. As I reached the door, he called out, Mrs. Williams, for what it's worth, I think what you're doing, making them see you as you really are, that takes real courage. I smiled. Or real anger. Sometimes, he said, there's not much difference. When I arrived back at Malik's house, I couldn't think of it as my home anymore. His Mercedes was in the driveway next to a silver Audi I recognized as belonging to Raymond Brooks, Tanisha's father. My stomach tightened. This couldn't be good. I found them all in the living room, Malik, Tanisha, Laverne, and Raymond. 4 against 1. An intervention, apparently. Tiana, Raymond said, standing as I entered. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from 40 years in investment banking. We've been waiting for you. Please sit. I remained standing. This feels rather formal. We're concerned, Laverne said, her earlier moment of vulnerability completely gone. Back to the polished, judgmental woman I knew. Malik tells us you're being difficult about the Golden Sunset opportunity. Difficult is an interesting choice of words. Raymond cleared his throat. Tiana, let's be frank. You're a woman in your mid-50s with limited prospects. Your employment situation is unfortunate. We're trying to help you land on your feet. Are you? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Of course we are, Malik said, but he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Mom, we found you a stable position with housing included. What more could you want? Respect, I thought. Recognition. To not be treated like a burden the moment I'm no longer useful. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the lease agreement from the Riverside Grand. I placed it on the coffee table between us. What's this? Raymond asked, picking it up. I watched his expression change as he read. Confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like respect. You've leased a penthouse, he said slowly, at the Riverside Grand. For $12,000 a month, Laverne added, snatching the paper from her husband's hands. Tiana, is this some kind of joke? How could you possibly 6 months paid in advance? I said quietly. I move in Friday. The silence in the room was deafening. Malik stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Mom, where did you get $72,000? I met my son's eyes and smiled. That, I said, is an excellent question. The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Where did you get $72,000? Malik's voice cracked on the last word. He was standing now, the lease agreement trembling slightly in his hands as he read it again, as if the numbers might change if he looked hard enough. I settled into the armchair across from them, the one I'd bought 3 years ago when Malik had mentioned they needed new living room furniture. They didn't know I'd paid for it, of course, just like they didn't know about most of the things I'd quietly funded over the years. I've been saving, I said simply. Raymond barked out a laugh. Saving, Tiana, you make $60,000 a year. Even if you saved every penny, which you clearly haven't given your contributions to this household, it would take you years to accumulate that kind of cash. You're absolutely right, Raymond, I agreed, enjoying the flicker of confusion that crossed his face, which is why I didn't save it from my salary. Laverne leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Then where did it come from? An inheritance, a lottery win, because I can't think of any legitimate source. Preston and Associates, I interrupted. 4 sets of eyes locked onto me. Your employer, Malik asked slowly. Did they give you some kind of bonus with your severance? I smiled. Not my employer, Malik. My company. The confusion on their faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. I don't understand, Tanisha said quietly. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What do you mean, your company? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, not the dummy account with $3,000 that I'd occasionally shown Malik when he'd insisted on helping me manage my finances. The real one. For the past 15 years, I said, turning my phone so they could see the screen, I've been telling you I'm an accountant at Preston and Associates. That was technically true. I am a CPA and I do work there. I swiped to another screen. What I didn't mention was that for the past 12 years I've owned 40% of the firm. Raymond stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. That's impossible. The buyout was finalized Tuesday morning. I continued, my voice steady. Isaiah Porter and I agreed it was time for me to step away from day-to-day operations. The board approved my exit package. I turned the phone to show the wire transfer confirmation. $8.5 million, I said. That's my share of the company, Raymond. The company I helped build while you all thought I was just filing tax returns and managing expense reports. Laverne's face had gone pale. You're lying. Am I? I stood and walked to where my laptop bag sat by the door. I'd brought it in from the car that morning knowing this confrontation was coming, knowing I'd need proof. I opened the laptop on the coffee table and pulled up the corporate filings for Preston and Associates. There it was in legal black and white, Tiana Marie Williams, 40% shareholder, Chief Financial Officer. The Preston and Associates is Isaiah Porter, I explained. The Associates part. That's me and 2 other silent partners. I've been CFO since year 3. Silent CFO because I preferred it that way. Malik was shaking his head, backing away like I'd pulled a gun instead of a laptop. No, Dad said Dad always said you were terrible with money, that you needed help managing things, that you'd be lost without him. Something in my chest twisted painfully. Your father, I said gently, was a good man, a loving husband, a wonderful father, but he had a very traditional view of marriage. He needed to be the provider, the financial expert, so I let him believe he was. You lied to him. Malik's voice rose. You lied to Dad. I never lied, I said firmly. I simply didn't correct his assumptions. There's a difference. That's semantics, Malik shouted. You let him think you let all of us think that you were dependent on us, that you needed our help, that you were just some basic accountant barely scraping by. And you all accepted that story very easily, I said, my own voice rising now. Because it was convenient. Because it made you feel important. Because it was easier to believe I was helpless than to consider I might be capable. Raymond had recovered enough to speak. This is absurd. If you had this kind of money, why would you live here? Why would you contribute to household expenses like some kind of tenant? Because Malik asked me to, I said, simply, turning to my son. After your father died, you were drowning in grief. You needed to feel useful, needed. You wanted to take care of me the way you couldn't take care of him. Tears were streaming down Malik's face now. So you played me. For 15 years you played me. I loved you, I said, my own voice breaking. I was trying to give you what you needed. What I needed was the truth. He slammed his hand on the coffee table. What I needed was a mother who trusted me enough to be honest. And what I needed, I said quietly, was a son who valued me for who I am, not what I could do for him. But the moment you thought I couldn't contribute financially anymore, you started shopping around for nursing homes. The silence that followed was suffocating. It wasn't like that, Malik said, but his voice lacked conviction. Wasn't it? I opened another file on my laptop. Let me show you something else. My investment portfolio. I turned the screen so they could all see. Real estate holdings, 3 downtown properties worth a combined $6.1 million. Stock portfolio, $4.2 million. Liquid assets, $1.7 million, not counting the $8.5 million buyout that was still settling. My total net worth, I said, is approximately $20 million, give or take a few $100,000 depending on the market. Laverne actually gasped. Raymond sank back into his chair, and Malik, my baby boy, looked at me like I was a stranger. $20 million, he whispered. You have $20 million. Yes. And you were going to let us send you to Golden Sunset to clean bedpans for minimum wage. I was curious, I admitted. I wanted to see how far you'd go, how easily you'd discard me when you thought I had nothing left to offer. That's sick, Laverne said, finding her voice. That's manipulation. Is it? I closed my laptop. Or is it just holding up a mirror? Raymond stood again, his face flushed. You've been deceiving us for years, playing some kind of sick game. I've been protecting myself, I interrupted. And honestly, I'm glad I did, because the moment you all thought I was vulnerable, you showed me exactly how much my presence here was about utility, not love. Mom, that's not fair. Malik's voice was pleading now. We were trying to help you. By finding me the cheapest possible solution to get me out of your house, I shook my head. That wasn't help, Malik. That was disposal. Tanisha finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. She's right. Everyone turned to look at her. She's right, Tanisha repeated, standing up. We weren't helping her. We were solving a problem. Our problem. Tanisha, Malik began. No, listen to me. She turned to face her husband. Your mother loses her job, and your first thought isn't how is she doing or what does she need. Your first thought is how does this affect our budget? We have bills. We have a mortgage that she paid 60% of the down payment for. Tanisha's voice rose. We have a house that she's been subsidizing for 5 years, and when she needs support, or when we think she needs support, we can't wait to ship her off to the first facility my mother finds. Malik stared at his wife. You knew, didn't you? Tanisha's silence was answer enough. You knew, Malik said again, his voice hardening. You knew she had money, and you didn't tell me. I suspected, Tanisha said carefully. The background check my firm ran before we got married flagged some inconsistencies. My heart started beating faster. I'd been careful, so careful. But of course a corporate law firm would run a thorough background check. Of course they'd find something. What kind of inconsistencies? Raymond demanded. Tanisha looked at me and I saw something in her eyes. A question. Permission, I nodded slightly. Preston and Associates corporate filings list Tiana as a 40% shareholder, Tanisha said. That's public record if you know where to look. I found it during our engagement. Malik's face went white. You've known for 10 years, 10 years. I knew she had assets she wasn't disclosing, Tanisha corrected. I didn't know the full extent, and I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place. It was her private business. I'm your husband. And she's a grown woman entitled to financial privacy, Tanisha shot back. What was I supposed to do, Malik, tell you that your mother didn't need your help? Strip away the thing that made you feel necessary. The room fell silent again. This is insane, Laverne said finally. This whole situation is insane. Tiana, you let my daughter marry into your family under false pretenses. I let your daughter marry a good man, I interrupted. My financial status had nothing to do with their relationship. It has everything to do with it. Laverne was on her feet now. You made fools of us. We offered you charity, we tried to help you, and all along you were sitting on millions of dollars. I never asked for charity, I said, my voice like ice. I never asked for anything. You offered, you assumed. You decided I was poor, helpless, in need of your superior wisdom and guidance. I simply didn't correct your assumptions." Raymond was shaking his head. "This is going to be all over the country club. When people find out we tried to send a multimillionaire to work at Golden Sunset." "Ah," I said softly. "There it is. You're not upset about the deception. You're upset about how it makes you look." "That's not," Raymond started. "It absolutely is," I said. "You're not worried about me or about Malik or about what this means for our family. You're worried about your reputation." I gathered my laptop and my purse. "I'm leaving now. I'll come back tomorrow to get the rest of my things. I move into my new place on Friday." "Mom, wait." Malik reached for my arm. I pulled away. "Don't. Not right now. We need to talk about this," he said desperately. "We need to work this out." "Do we?" I asked. "Because it seems to me that you need to figure some things out on your own first. Like why your first instinct when your mother needed help was to ship her off somewhere convenient, or why you're more upset about being deceived than you are about how you treated me." I headed for the door, then paused and turned back. "Oh, and Malik, that trust fund your grandfather left you, the one you've never known about. It matured last month, $2.3 million. I've been managing it for you since your father died, waiting for you to be mature enough to handle it responsibly." I watched his face cycle through shock, confusion, and something that might have been shame. "I'm not sure you're there yet," I said quietly. "But the money's there when you are." I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Tanisha. "Thank you for not exposing everything I know. We need to talk. Alone. There's something else you should know about Malik's situation. It's worse than you think." My hands were shaking as I typed back, "My hotel, Somerset. Tonight at 8. I sat in the car for a long moment processing what had just happened. The first bomb had been dropped. The family I'd protected for 15 years now knew the truth, or at least part of it. But Tanisha's text suggested there were more revelations to come. And from the sound of it, the next ones were going to be much more dangerous.